The real estate market is changing rapidly, and this has led many people to believe that we are going into a crash. But even though there are so many people here on YouTube saying that the housing market is crashing and we're going to lose 30% on housing prices, there are so many reasons that housing prices cannot crash nationally. So in this video, I'm going to share those reasons and share my actual prediction. There are 4 fundamentals that affect housing prices, and they are demographics, interest rates, inflation, and inventory levels. In April of 2020, it was announced that millennials have overtaken the baby boomers as America's largest generation. Now this is significant because millennials are at peak family formation and home buying age. Even though in 2019 it was said that millennials prefer to rent over buy, unfortunately there are only so many homes that can be rented. And once millennials start having families, they will either choose to rent homes at a much more expensive price, live in apartments which for a family can be difficult, or start buying homes using an FHA loan where they can have a low down payment. The second fundamental when it comes to the effects on pricing is the interest rates. Over the past couple of years, we saw interest rates near all-time lows, and this increased affordability, which led to increased demand with low supply. Now, since January of last year, we have seen 30-year mortgage rates double, but because of the low interest rates, that played a significant role on these inflated prices. The third element of the massive appreciation we saw over the past couple of years is simply just inflation and the abundance of money that now exists within the US economy. The Fed over the last few years injected trillions of dollars, and this pushed up assets across the board. Now I know that there are several people that would say that this appreciation was a substantial amount, but if we look at the amount of money that was printed, it was roughly the same amount as home price appreciation. But with all that being said, I don't want to ignore the fact that we're still dealing with affordability issues, which I will talk more about later. However, this doesn't ignore the fact that inflation has had a huge effect on asset prices. And the last fundamental that contributes to housing price fluctuation is inventory levels. Over the past couple of years, we saw substantially low inventory levels, and honestly, these levels were unheard of before the pandemic. But I think we can understand that as inventory levels declined, that made supply go down, and therefore led to people paying prices above listing because there wasn't enough housing available. But low inventory played a crucial role in the amount of appreciation we saw over the past couple of years. But besides those 4 fundamentals, one thing I believe we should look at is how much safer the people are who are taking out these loans. Mortgage delinquencies are near record lows. How will these people not be able to pay for their mortgages? I believe there are a couple of ways. First, unemployment skyrockets. Now, I do believe that unemployment will go up into 2023 as we are already seeing jobs being cut, but we are still in a stable job market, so it will be difficult to get to really high levels. And how long will this last? You have to assume that not only unemployment goes up, but it remains high to where people can't afford their mortgage payments each month. Now, I've heard it said that foreclosures have increased drastically, and this is not completely true. The problem is that many people are comparing it to last year, and with all the stimulus checks and support from the government, of course the numbers are going to be higher. But what people don't hear is what the numbers are like now compared to pre-pandemic levels when there wasn't all this government support. Atom Data Solutions looked at the foreclosure statistics, and here's what we got. August foreclosure starts were at 86% of the number of foreclosure starts in August of 2019. But it's important to remember that even then, foreclosure activity was relatively low compared to historical averages. Now think about it. In 2019, home prices were much lower than where they are right now, and a ton of people were buying homes at these high prices in 2020 and 2021. So even with these increased prices, the foreclosures are still lower than 2019. Now, for transparency, I do see these numbers continue to rise even higher than 2019 levels, especially as unemployment rises. But we cannot assume that foreclosures will be as high as before because of the kinds of loans people have and how low mortgage delinquencies are. But that's not all of it when it comes to foreclosures. If we compare the first half of 2022 to 2008, the numbers are unbelievable. In 2008, they were at 1.8% of all housing units. But right now, that number is 0.12. I mean, think about the difference there and what really needs to happen to get back to those numbers. If you are someone who believes that the market is going to crash, we would probably have to see the number of foreclosures 10x to get to the amount of foreclosures that could flood the market with the inventory needed to see a 2008 move. But here is something that I don't think many people recognize. In 2008, the market tanked. We saw stocks move down massively. But how much do you think home prices dropped? According to the St. Louis Fed, the median home price decreased almost 20%. So even though many people believe that it was real estate that caused much of the issues that we saw during the great financial crisis, home prices were much more stable than the stock market. And let me say that the reason is pretty obvious. Not everyone needs to own Apple, Microsoft, Google, or Facebook, but everyone needs a place to live. The people that were selling their homes were doing so because they had to. And when we look at where we are right now, why would people want to sell their homes? There are only a couple of reasons. First is that families selling their homes are needing to sell because their current home is too small or they need to move. The second reason is that these people selling are either investors or people with a second home. Now, with 24% of investors buying single family homes in 2021, there could be a good amount trying to sell for high prices, but this is unlikely to remain going into 2023. But besides that, people will not want to sell their homes. And what does that do with inventory? It will remain low unless people can't afford their mortgage payments. And with foreclosures now back to pre-pandemic levels and delinquencies near record lows, I cannot see this happening. And it is because of these things that I cannot see home prices drop 20%, which is what defines as a crash. Now, people will say, but home prices skyrocketed and affordability is too high. But that is not the main factor that affects home prices. Here is proof. I believe we should compare it to other countries that have experienced high amounts of unaffordability. If you look at disposable income versus housing prices in Canada, it's not even close. And even though the Canadian housing market is less affordable than the US and continues to be less affordable since the 2000s, the prices didn't crash in 2008. Now, I find this really interesting because if you look at affordability in the US, the last time we were at these affordability levels, they corrected but didn't crash. But as the level of affordability in Canada has not caused the housing market to crash, at least as of yet, we could see something similar with the US. And with the low amount of mortgage delinquencies, foreclosure starts, high credit scores, and healthier loans, affordability is less impactful toward home prices because people have become more efficient with their money. Now, I do believe that we are in a correction because there wasn't stability with these home prices, and the freeze in homebuyer demand allowed for sellers to actually take a moment and list their homes for a real price and not some absurd number that was probably going to get outbid anyway. And this leads to the next thing, which is inventory. If we look at the active listing count, which is the count of active single family homes and condo or townhome listings, we can see that we are nowhere near normal levels, even with the drastic increase of the homes on the market. Now, yes, this doesn't include multifamily, but I will talk more about that later. However, there are so many news headlines that are talking about how high inventory is. But when we look at the data, that's simply not true. The next metric that I believe is important to look at is month supply. If we were to look at this at surface level, it appears that we are at extreme levels. But here's the thing about monthly supply. The houses that are included in this data are anything that is for sale. They could be houses that haven't been complete yet or homes that need a full renovation. This is why there are a lot of people who believe that the housing market is being flooded with supply. The other thing that we need to consider is look at July going into August. We can see that the monthly supply has tanked. Now, what is the reason for this? Is it because there were a lot of homes being sold? That can't be because the number of home sales dropped 2% month over month. I believe that the reason for this is because those who were planning on selling couldn't get top dollar, so they unlisted their property. And what does that do to supply? It decreases the inventory. So what we need to compare is the amount of people who need a home to the amount of people who need to sell their home, and not people who are just listing their homes on the market. As of right now, even though there was a freeze in buying homes, will the rate of supply or demand increase the most over the next couple of years? If you believe it is supply, then where's that supply going to come from? If it is demand, then how are people going to afford these homes that have appreciated so much over the past couple of years? And how quickly will it shift to one side or the other? These are the most important questions, in my opinion, that I believe everyone needs to ask themselves when you look at the housing market. Now, I want to touch on interest rates because I believe many people have this idea that interest rates only affect those trying to buy a home. But what if this actually affected sellers more than you think? As I said before, everyone needs a home. So the increase of interest rates is actually an incentive for people to not list their homes because they would be paying more money for less home. Just last year alone, 25% of homeowners refinanced their properties. And there was no question that almost every single one of these refinances led to a lower rate. Maybe not a lower payment necessarily, but definitely a lower interest rate. So why would someone give up the low interest rate? It would be to get top dollar on their home, and as I said before, those sellers recognize that because there wasn't enough buyers in the market, they may not have been able to get the price that they were looking for. So that steep incline in supply has started to plateau, and those people are now starting to leave the market, leading to low inventory again. Now, multifamily housing has increased, and there are certain cities where we have seen drastic increases in apartment buildings and condos. But here's what we need to consider. What are families wanting? We have just seen that millennials are now the largest generation in the world, and this generation is at peak buying age. So what does that say about the multifamily space? I can see these 3-bedroom apartments and townhomes going quick, but that affects rent and not home prices. Plus, we are still nowhere near the amount of homes we need to be, even for multifamily. The National Apartment Association said that the US will need 4.3 million units by 2035 to keep up with demand. And in order to ease the affordability crisis, we need 600,000 units now. At some point, those families are probably going to want to move to single family or smaller multifamily properties. And our supply as a nation is still not where it needs to be. A new study reported that we are behind on 3.8 million homes for meeting housing needs. So what I'm expecting is that we will see a sharp correction, but it will not be a crash. The drastic increase in rates froze buyers, and once we see a plateau and a slight downward move in mortgage rates, I believe buyers will fly back in. But when we look at supply, I cannot see us getting back to pre-pandemic levels unless unemployment becomes so bad that these job losses lead to drastic increases in mortgage delinquencies and then lead to foreclosures. I think that there's a lot that has to happen to see high amounts of supply. With that being said, real estate needs to be considered on a local level and not just nationally. Certain markets are still pretty stable, while others have gotten hit really bad. So make sure that you are looking in your region to see what is actually going on. Where I'm at in Georgia, it is still a very stable market. And despite what people are saying, I'm still going to be buying good deals. If there is a deal where I can add value to the property, it doesn't matter if the market is moving to the downside. It only means that I need to be more strict with my numbers. But I would love to hear what you think about the housing market, whether you believe it's going to crash or not. Also, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you are notified when new content comes out. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one.